Hey y'all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm your girl Mello and I'm back with another reaction video. And today we are watching South Africa's most shocking true crime story ever. Enjoy. This is my second reaction video.
Hi everyone,
Let's
welcome to
go.
my channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The
true
dark
crime
secrets
today.
of a rich and happy family. It's often said that great wealth can corrupt even the best of
Is this an American thing? I was actually looking for South African true crime. But why is
people,
this an
but in
American
reality,
person speaking
that's not
about this?
entirely accurate. Wealth simply amplifies the existing negative qualities in a person, providing a
True.
sense of impunity and permissiveness. While the absence of money is certainly not pleasant, it's important to remember that banknotes,
Wait,
jewels, and
what's
figures on
going
bank
on here? Is
accounts
this
by
a
themselves
documentary? Like, what's
cannot bring
going on? I'm
happiness,
actually
especially if
quite
they were
confused.
obtained through dishonest means or at the expense of someone else's life. The case of Soretta and Leon Brits in 2020 shook not just South Africa where this dramatic story unfolded, but also
Okay.
the
It
entire
is.
world.
But I think
The investigation promised to be challenging.
sorry, this is the last time I'm speaking. But I think the channel itself is like um a documentary thing. Um Made by an American person, sorry. Do I need to start this from scratch?
With an innocent individual initially
Sorry.
becoming the main
I zoned out
suspect.
there for a bit.
It wasn't until
Okay.
this dramatic story unfolded, but also the entire world. The investigation promised to be challenging, with an innocent individual initially becoming the main suspect. It wasn't until an unexpected and heartfelt confession emerged that the true perpetrator, who had the least malice towards the victim, was identified. Now let's delve into the complicated scheme from the beginning, where money became a stumbling block in what many considered to be a large, harmonious family. The Brits family, a family of European immigrants, settled in the early 1970s in the small but cozy town of Patter, located in the Northern Cape province of South Africa. Despite its modest size, this town is an important economic and tourist hub in the region, known as Bushmanland. It's also worth noting that the surrounding landscapes are incredibly picturesque, attracting biologists and researchers with their diverse flora and fauna. In 1976, the Brits had their first son, whom they named Toki, and in 1979, their second son, Leon, was born. Even by local standards,
That guy looks like Billie
1979,
Eilish's
their
brother.
second son, Leon, was born. Even by
Okay, this is
local
a serious
standards,
story.
the family was considered quite affluent. The family patriarch owned what was arguably the only major hotel in the area, which eventually grew
they
into
were
a
rich,
comprehensive
rich.
hotel and restaurant complex. Both brothers excelled in school, were active in
Good.
sports, and thanks to their parents' efforts, received prestigious educations. After completing his studies, Toki left his hometown, while Leon, who had been helping his parents and learning the intricacies of the hotel business from his teenage years, decided to stay to eventually take over the reins of management. He was intelligent, attentive to detail, and possessed a so-called entrepreneurial vein, enabling him to manage affairs effectively. The story of Cinderella at the hotel complex owned by the Brits family is quite remarkable. Various events, parties, and celebrations were often held at one such event. Leon noticed a young beauty among the guests. A slender brunette with green eyes and a captivating smile caught his eye immediately. The young man decided to approach her and introduce himself, only to find out that she was just 14 years old and still in school.
Psych! I was just kidding.
Though she appeared much older, this fact deeply unsettled
So
Leon,
awkward.
who was already 25 at the time,
Leon,
but
stay
he still
away.
decided to invite the beauty
Leon,
for a
stay
dance.
away.
And afterward,
Why
they
would
spent
you
about
do
an hour
that?
chatting while sitting on the terrace. The schoolgirl's name was Soretta, and from that very first meeting, Brits couldn't stop thinking about her, constantly dreaming of their next encounter. But let's delve
she's
deeper
14.
into this complicated
This is
and
so
disturbing
awkward.
case.
I don't know how to
A bit into who this
react.
enchanting young stranger was, Soretta Kerr was born on September 6, 1990, the youngest of 3 children in a family of immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her family lived in poverty, and her parents had been teetering on the brink of divorce for many years, exacerbating the already difficult situation. When the youngest daughter was only 9 years old, the head of the family tragically died from a venomous snake bite, leaving the mother alone with 3 children, barely making ends meet. All the Kerr children had to work to survive, making Soretta's childhood a difficult period filled with hardships and deprivation.
Oh.
But then, a wealthy suitor suddenly
I was about to say, now she's meeting this man that is like rich, rich. Like, obviously, she's gonna be like, oh yeah, I like him too.
appeared in her life, ready to lay the world at her feet.
Oh
Due to her
shit.
young age, the girl didn't understand
Exactly,
how to
she's
react to the
young.
attention from an adult man who was 11 years older than her.
Bruh.
Leon seemed genuinely in love. He sought any excuse to meet with the girl, picked her up after
She's 14,
school,
bro.
took her to popular
She's
restaurants,
14.
bought expensive gifts, fashionable clothes, and tried to please her in every way possible. Soretta received things she had always been deprived of, and luxury literally went to the schoolgirl's head.
Oh.
She understood that with this man she could build a family, and neither they nor their children would
Have to
ever
worry
want
about
for anything.
anything.
The girl's mother, despite her daughter's young age, approved of the
Of
relationship.
course.
Leon seemed to her
they
a reliable,
need it.
decent and kind person, and no one doubted the sincerity of his feelings. However, the young man's parents were very worried about his romance with her, as such relationships, if they went too far, could be considered a criminal offense.
Bruh.
But the young man insisted he was willing to wait until his beloved turned 18, after which he would officially marry her.
So it's basically just
An
gonna groom
unexpected
her.
pregnancy. About a year into their relationship, 15-year-old Soretta realized she was pregnant. She was hesitant to tell anyone, knowing that the news would not please either her mother or her lover. The girl began to wear baggy clothes to hide her changed figure and became withdrawn and uncommunicative. But she could no longer keep everything secret and decided to confess everything to her partner. The news of the impending addition was a shock
That's
to
me
Leon.
right now.
He understood that she could not only tarnish his reputation but also lead to serious legal problems. The closeness between them had been initiated by him, and now he could be accused of seducing a teenager, which he couldn't allow. First, the man paid for a visit to a private clinic, where they not only confirmed the pregnancy but also discovered that she was expecting twins. With the term approaching a critical point, Leon found a doctor at the same private clinic who agreed to terminate the pregnancy anonymously. Soretta was devastated and felt completely crushed, as her partner, who had promised to love and protect her, forcibly persuaded her to terminate their unborn children.
Oh my.
However, Lion, being older, was able to pressure her and convince her of the necessity of the procedure. He promised that in the future, when they got married, they would definitely have children, but for now, it would simply destroy their lives and plans for a happy future together. The young woman had no choice but to comply, and she did as her boyfriend asked. She suffered from pain for several days after, but the physical discomfort was overshadowed by a sense of guilt and overwhelming depression. Soretta stayed in her room, cried constantly, and didn't know how to continue living with this. Her mother didn't show much interest in her condition, assuming her daughter was just upset over some argument with her boyfriend,
Oh yeah.
but
the mom
everything would
doesn't know that
pass
she's
once they
she got
reconciled.
pregnant.
A couple of days later, Leon actually showed up at his beloved's doorstep and took her to the city to distract her, to walk in the park, and to browse through stores. He believed this would help her recover faster and lift her spirits. Sure enough, she soon managed to return to her previous life, but the feelings of resentment and distrust towards her partner lingered. 3 years later, while the young woman was in her senior year of high school, she discovered she was pregnant again. At that time, she was only a few months away from becoming
Don't make me mad, Soretta. Why would you do that again?
an adult, and this unexpected delicate condition was not supposed to cause any particular issues. However, when she told Lion about it, he reacted very negatively again and insisted that his beloved terminate the pregnancy, arguing that they were too young to start a family. This time,
So you, at this point, you are like, I think how old? 27, 28 years old. You should know better, okay? Do better.
Soretta firmly refused, stating that she would not do it and would keep the child even if it meant raising it on her own.
Go to
After some
Soretta.
thought, Lion eventually made an official proposal,
When were you gonna do that if she
presenting
didn't
her
stand
with
her
a beautiful
ground?
diamond ring. By then, their once tender feelings had considerably dulled, but this renewed promise and Soretta's ongoing pregnancy left him with no choice. By the time she graduated from high school, the changes in her figure were already obvious, and in the fall, as soon as she turned 18, they got married in a small private ceremony. The wedding was more of a formality, as their relationship had long since lost its romantic spark.
Oh, no.
The couple had a lavish wedding.
Oh.
The newlyweds appeared quite happy, but each had certain doubts about the correctness of their decision. A few months later, the couple had their first son, and 2 years after that, twin boys were born. The family lived in affluence, able to indulge in anything they wanted, and from the outside they looked like a successful, well-off, and happy family. The business, founded and developed over many years by Lyon's parents, was quite profitable. Over time, the man also started his own chain of stores and fast food eateries, and his ventures were on the rise. With the family business flourishing, however, from the mid-2010s, the family began to experience troubles and misfortunes.
2010 is
In
crazy.
2014, Lyon's father passed away suddenly due to long-standing heart issues, and his mother's health deteriorated from the shock of losing her husband.
Oh,
She soon showed rapidly progressing signs of dementia, forcing her sons to place her in a specialized clinic for necessary care and proper attention. Toki returned to his hometown after many years away to help his brother manage the business, and together, they took over the operation of a hotel. At the same time, Leon decided to involve his wife in the family business, something she had long aspired to do. It was decided to register a mining equipment and tool store in her name. She dove into work while also continuing to raise their 3 young sons. Brit, the eldest son, started elementary school in his hometown of Poeter. But as the twins grew older, the parents faced the pressing issue of choosing a suitable educational institution for all their children. The challenge was that finding quality education in South Africa was not so straightforward. The spouses found a
sorry, I have an alarm actually going on for 7 o'clock for something.
good school in the nearby city of Kakamas. The school was about 75 miles from Brit's home, but there was no need for daily travel back and forth. The couple decided to rent a spacious house in Kakamas.
Sorry, I actually want to go back
It's
to
not
this
so
one.
straightforward. The challenging issue of choosing the town of Poeter. But as the twins grew older, the parents faced the pressing issue of choosing a suitable educational institution for all their children. The challenge was that finding quality education in South Africa was not so straightforward. The spouses found a good school in the nearby city of Kakamas. The school was about 75 miles from Brit's home, but there was no need for daily travel back and forth. The couple decided to rent a spacious house in Kakamas, allowing them to split their time between the 2 cities. This arrangement would enable them to balance their family life, business, and educational needs.
Nice.
Soretta moved with the sons to Kakamas, but Lyon stayed in Poeter as he couldn't leave the business and manage affairs remotely. However, the wife had to step back from managing the store, although she really enjoyed it and was quite successful at it. The woman dedicated herself entirely to raising the sons, and they only visited home to see their husband and father on weekends and holidays. Leon himself rarely came to Kakamas due to his busy schedule. Initially, it seemed that everything was in order, but over time, the spouses drifted further apart and their feelings significantly cooled.
My thing is, what were they thinking? Like, even before they got married, bro, like, there were no more sparks. There was no more spark. So, how did they think this was gonna work out? Because now they're living apart as well. It's just,
In
girl,
2018, Sarah started having
girl.
health problems, which she did not take seriously at first. However, an examination revealed that the young woman had oncology and problems with the cardiovascular system. Soon, she underwent surgery to remove the malignant tumor and was prescribed a treatment course. Fortunately, all procedures were timely, saving the life of the mother of 3. But from then on, for prevention, she needed periodic therapy at a clinic in Johannesburg, which was quite expensive. The Brits family had the means, and Lyon would never skimp on the health of his son's mother. Additionally, Soretta hired a nanny and a housekeeper, who helped her around the house and looked after the children, which was essential when the woman went for treatment. By that time, the spouses had drifted so far apart that each essentially lived their own life. The young woman started an affair in Johannesburg, so when going for another course of preventive therapy,
Sorry! I did not expect that from you. Expected that from him, not you, babe.
She would not
What?
started an affair in Johannesburg, so when going for another course of preventive therapy, she would not stay in a hotel but at her lover's place. Leon apparently also
Soretta.
periodically had women, as compromising photos and messages found in his phone suggested. In fact, nothing
Of
but their
course.
3 children bound the couple together anymore. The family issues did not affect the business, which continued to thrive. The
Okay.
hotel, stores, and restaurant chain were generating impressive profits.
One thing about them, they
some
can
of
run a
which
business,
Lion
eh?
invested in real estate
They
in major
can
cities,
run
earning a
a
good income from
business.
rentals. Undoubtedly, their family was not only the wealthiest in Poeter, but also among the most affluent in the Northern Cape province. Naturally, the Brits had many enviers and ill-wishers. However, the family was not only the wealthiest in Poeter, but also among the most affluent in the Northern Cape province. the numbers of enviers and ill-wishers grew in proportion to the profitability of their business. Leon, his parents, and his brother regularly received threats and various demands. Leon himself often confided in his wife that he had long felt unsafe and feared that someone might try to take away his life's work. In each of Leon's offices, as well as at his and his parents' homes, there were safes and cleverly disguised hiding places storing cash in various currencies, securities, diamonds, jewelry, and gold bars. Soretta knew only about some of them, specifically those in their own home in Poeter. Initially, the threats were a serious concern, but over time, as the man began receiving them daily, he simply stopped paying attention to them. He believed they were just attempts to intimidate him. As the ill-wishers had never tried to act on their threats, however, a tragedy soon occurred that ended Leon's life. On October 7, 2020, Leon's wife called him and asked him to check on their dogs, which, according to a neighbor, had gotten out. Leon promised to call back as soon as he arrived and checked that everything was in order, but the return call never came. Concerned, Soretta called her husband's number several times, but no one answered. Leaving the children with the nanny, she drove to Poeter. The front door was unlocked, but it seemed that no one was home. It was suspiciously quiet inside, and no one responded to her calls.
Plot twist also, because why did I think that she would be the one that gets killed? I thought this guy would be the one that kills her. Don't tell me she was involved. But I do also feel like the lover is the one that did it. But
She then went to the
crazy.
backyard, where she found her husband's body floating face down in the
Is
pool.
this even the
There
real
were
story
wounds
at
on
this
his
point?
back,
You know what I
the
mean?
water was
Like,
tinged pink with blood, and it was clear that he was deceased. Panicking, Sarah called the police, the emergency services, and
also, it's very annoying to me that this YouTuber went from saying Leon to Lio or Lion, and then with her, she went from Sareta to Sarah. Pick a name, my brother. What is their actual name? Like, what is
then
her
dialed
name?
Toki,
Sarah,
informing him of the incident.
Sareta.
When law enforcement arrived, they immediately cordoned off the house as a crime scene. It was evident that the businessman's death was violent. The body had several stab wounds and signs of a struggle, and a safe in the house had been opened and its contents taken. An initial theory was that a burglar had broken into the house and the homeowner, returning unexpectedly, had caught them off guard, paying with his life. However, many other valuable items in plain sight remained untouched, suggesting the burglars had specifically targeted what was in the safe. The murder of the successful and wealthy businessman quickly made a lot of noise, hotly discussed in the
I have
media
never
and
heard
on
this
social
story, I'm not
networks,
gonna lie, guys.
generating
And
numerous
I'm from
rumors,
South Africa.
gossip, and speculations. Many knew about the long-standing threats against Brits and believed that competitors or ill-wishers had fulfilled their threats. However, the first and key suspect in the case became Toki, who
Toki,
had
the
been managing
brother.
the family business with his brother for the last few years. First, he had visited Lion shortly before the tragedy and was considered the last person to see him alive. Second, their mother was in very poor health, with doctors giving her only a few months to live, and her will, reportedly, was stored at the younger son's house. The prevailing theory was that the elder brother disagreed with the business mostly going
But
to
I
Lion and wanted
doubt.
to access the will to alter it.
Also, Utogi left for many years. You know what I mean? And the brother, like Ulio, was the one helping with the business. So I'm sure he would understand that. You know what I mean? I'm sure he would understand that. Bible, sanandikenda
This
hamba
explained
kanuki
why the
10
other items
years
in the house remained
kwashiyeka Ulio.
untouched. It was also suspected that he did not act alone, and murder was not part of the original
I don't
plan.
think that theory is
Toki
correct.
categorically denied any involvement and stated
Period,
that under
Toki.
no circumstances would he harm his own brother,
Period,
especially
Tokes.
since they had never had disputes or disagreements over financial matters. He sought support from Soretta, who asserted that she believed him and would help find the best lawyer to prove his innocence. For nearly 2 months, the investigation was at a standstill, with no new evidence, leads, or witnesses emerging. However, one day, 35-year-old Jacques Van walked into the police
Van
station and
Van.
offered to make a deal by pleading guilty and revealing all his accomplices in exchange for a reduced sentence. It turned out that Jacques had once attended the same school as Soretta. They were friends and he even had feelings for her, but she did not reciprocate and soon started a relationship with Leon. The former friends had not seen each other for many years, but one day they coincidentally met at a shopping center and started talking. At that time, Jacques was going through a tough period. He had divorced his wife, lost his job, developed a dependence on alcohol, and was in dire need of money. Soretta saw that her former admirer still harbored tender feelings for her, so she began to confide in him about her unhappy marriage. She claimed that her husband mistreated her, was abusive, but she could not leave him because he threatened to take their sons and leave her with nothing. This topic was painful for Van Van, since his ex-wife had barred him from seeing their children after the divorce, and he genuinely empathized with Soretta and wanted to help. They exchanged phone numbers, and a few days later, Soretta, having devised a cunning plan, called her former friend and tearfully told him that her husband had beaten her. She said she couldn't leave him, and the only solution was to eliminate the tyrant. Soretta was very persuasive, and
Soretta? Soretta!
Jacques believed her. Moreover, she promised him $500,000 South African rand as payment, and he, as mentioned, was in desperate need of money. Jacques agreed to help Soretta, but he did not want to do the dirty work himself, so he decided to hire other people. The plan was developed in early 20, but due to the global epidemic that swept the world, its execution had to be delayed during this difficult time. The Brit's family business suffered colossal losses, a store and part of the restaurants had to be closed, and Lion wanted to sell the hotel, which his wife did not agree with. In late September, the conspirators returned to the original plan, but Jacques requested half of the payment up front. However, due to financial difficulties, Soretta could only withdraw 100,000 rand, and also gave her accomplice her engagement ring. With this money, Jacques hired a friend named Enrique Williams, who had drug issues and was willing to commit murder for money. However, Williams was afraid he couldn't handle a grown, strong man alone, so he brought along his 25-year-old friend, Amanta Bari, to share the fee. Soretta gave the criminals access to the house, informed them about the safe's location.
I was about to say, I'm sure not everybody knew about the safe. So there's no ways Soretta was not involved. But then I was also like, nah, she wouldn't be that involved. Like I feel like maybe it's, oh my gosh, maybe it's a thing that she came up with her lover. I don't know, guys.
And
I'm so
allowed them to
disappointed
take
in
whatever they
her.
liked to make the robbery look more plausible. The only condition was that the dog should not be harmed, so she let them out in advance. The neighbors saw this and called her, signaling that Williams and Bari were in the house, after which, she called her husband and lured him into a deadly trap. When the unsuspecting man entered the house, he was struck on the head with a baseball bat by one of the lurking criminals, and another attacked him with a knife, leaving him no chance. Lion was stabbed 8 times and hit with the bat a dozen times before his lifeless body was thrown into the pool. After opening the safe, the criminals found no money, only securities, diamonds, and gold bars.
Gold
They handed over the loot to
bars?
Jacques, who in turn gave everything to Soretta. The criminals decided not to take anything else from the house, fearing they would leave too many traces. They were only counting on the large sum promised by the client. Jacques was not supposed to appear at the crime scene himself. Soretta feared he would be caught on surveillance camera footage and recognized as Toki had seen him a couple of times and knew he was his brother's wife's school friend. He was only supposed to pass on the advanced payment and instructions to the accomplice. However, Jacques was anxious to ensure everything went smoothly and drove past the Brits' house several times to make sure the perpetrators were in place and the victim had arrived. Directly to them, his car was captured on camera,
Oh
and although the
my
license plate was not clearly visible,
word.
the police were interested in the vehicle, meaning that finding its owner was only a matter of time. Furthermore, there was no money in the safe, and all the family's accounts were frozen during the investigation.
So they
Soretta
couldn't
had
get
no way to pay the
paid.
hired perpetrators, as selling diamonds, bars, or securities would expose her. She
Yeah.
asked them to wait, but Williams and Bari were not willing to wait and began to threaten Jacques.
Yeah.
Desperate, Jacques had not received the money, was plagued by guilt, and his accomplice threatened to deal with him. He realized that he would end up either behind bars or
Or
follow Leon.
dead.
Jacques shared his concerns with his sister, who told their mother, and together the women convinced him to voluntarily surrender to the police and reveal the other participants in the plot to secure a more lenient punishment. In his full account to the police, Jacques believed he had done a noble act, as he saw Leon as a man who mistreated his wife, was abusive, and threatened to take away the children. However, it was actually Soretta who who initially directed the police to consider Toki as the main suspect, citing a will and property disputes between the brothers. The
Hypo
authorities decided to
Sareta.
detain and interrogate the woman to uncover her true motives. It turned out that she and her husband had fallen out of love long ago,
Before
and
they even
each
got
was living
married,
a separate
child.
life. Soretta had a lover in Johannesburg whom
Bruh.
she wanted to join permanently.
I thought it was the lover
However,
this whole
when she
time.
expressed her desire to divorce Lion, he categorically refused to agree. He also threatened to leave her with nothing and take the sons if she decided to leave him. It's hard to say what motivated Leon, but it's likely he still had feelings for his beautiful wife and hoped to mend their relationship. Soretta, however, decided that she would inherit his money and business upon his death, which would allow her and her lover to live comfortably. She also saw an
Soretta.
opportunity to rid herself of Toki by framing him, thus becoming the sole owner of the hotel, stores, and restaurants
Oh.
after her mother-in-law's death. Her plan might have
Oh.
succeeded if there had been money in the safe and she had managed to pay off the hired perpetrators.
That's so true.
The trial of the criminal quartet took place in the spring of 2021.
Not the
Each
quartet,
participant's
criminal
role in this
quartet.
high-profile case was considered. Jacques Van Van, who made a deal with the prosecution, told everything in detail and turned in his accomplices. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 5 years. The hired perpetrators, Enrique Williams and Amantal Bari, were found guilty of premeditated murder with special cruelty and robbery. They were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As for the widow who orchestrated the murder of her own husband, she managed to convince the court that she had been a victim from the very beginning of their relationship.
Sareta.
She testified that Lion coerced her into intimacy when she was just 14 years old, and a year later, when she became pregnant, Brits forced her to terminate the pregnancy at a fairly late stage. In recent years,
They're
despite the
true, though.
disappearance of love, he refused to divorce her and threatened to take the children. Nevertheless, Soretta Brits was sentenced to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole
Okay.
from the beginning of her term. The court considered her remorse and heartfelt confession, as well as her status as the mother of 3 minor children. However, 3 years after the sentence was passed, she remains incarcerated. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories for you.
No, that was actually crazy. That was actually such a crazy story. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know I did. I didn't even know about that story, and it happened in South Africa. I'm South African. Like, what? What? But yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.